A quiet hum filled the air as Dr. Kim Jin-woo checked the quantum stabilizers one final time. The research facility outside Seoul represented South Korea's most ambitious scientific project, an attempt to achieve stable quantum entanglement across unprecedented distances. Jin-woo's team had worked for 3 years on this moment. "All systems nominal," called out Dr. Ba Sun-mai, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Quantum field integrity at 98%. Jin-woo nodded, feeling the bead of sweat trickle down his temple despite the room's cool temperature. "Begin the entanglement sequence." The massive circular apparatus at the center of the chamber began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. Blue-white energy crackled between the spinning rings as the quantum particles accelerated. "Field stability holding," Sun-mai reported, though her voice carried a note of surprise. "But we're getting unusual readings from the subspace monitors." Jin-woo frowned, moving to her station. The readings shouldn't be fluctuating like this. The pattern suggested something impossible. "Are we generating a harmonic resonance?" Before she could answer, the spinning rings flared with blinding light. Everyone shielded their eyes as alarms blared throughout the facility. The light collapsed inward, forming what appeared to be a perfect circle of absolute darkness. "Shutdown! Emergency shutdown!" Jin-woo shouted, but the technicians at the controls shook their heads in panic. "It's not responding to commands." The darkness expanded, its edges shimmering with blue energy. The room's gravity seemed to waver as smaller objects began floating toward the circle. Papers, pens, then chairs. "Evacuate," Jin-woo ordered. "Now." But before anyone could reach the exits, the darkness stabilized, forming a perfectly circular gateway about 10 meters across. Through it, stars were visible, but not in any constellation pattern Jin-woo recognized. Then something massive began to emerge. A vast hull of dark metal, scared and pitted, pushed through the gateway. It moved with deliberate precision, somehow navigating the relatively small opening despite its enormous size. The vessel, for it was clearly a ship of some kind, extended what seemed like hundreds of meters beyond the gateway, which had expanded to accommodate its bulk. "That's impossible," whispered Sun-mai beside him. "The energy required to maintain a stable dimensional gateway of this size." The ship finally came to rest, hovering impossibly in the center of the research chamber. It bore markings in English, ISS Paradox. Below that, in smaller letters, Earth Dimensional Defense Force. A hatch on the underside of the vessel opened, and a platform descended. Standing on it were 6 figures in dark military-style uniforms. They looked human, entirely human. The leader stepped forward, a woman with short black hair streaked with gray, a jagged scar running from her left temple to her jaw. Her uniform bore captain's insignia, and despite her small stature, she carried herself with unmistakable authority. "I am Captain Park Hae-jin of the Interdimensional Survey Ship Paradox," she announced in perfect Korean. "We come from Earth, but not your Earth." Jin-woo found himself stepping forward despite security personnel moving to intercept. "I'm Dr. Kim Jin-woo." What is this?" Captain Park's eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him step back. "Your quantum experiment created a beacon across dimensions. We've been searching for a stable connection to this particular variant of Earth for months." She looked around the room. "We need to speak with your world leaders immediately." 3 days later, Jin-woo sat in the back of an emergency United Nations session in New York. Captain Park stood at the podium, her posture rigid as she addressed the assembled representatives. "Our Earth was like yours once," she explained, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. "Peaceful, divided by petty politics, unaware of the greater multiverse." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the assembly. It showed Earth, but an Earth where vast sections appeared to be simply missing, replaced by swirling darkness. Cities lay in ruins. The oceans had receded from shorelines. "This is what remains of our world after the Void Collective began their consumption," Captain Park continued. "They are not a species as you understand the concept. They are entities that exist between dimensions, feeding on reality itself. The Russian representative stood. Captain, while your ship is certainly impressive, and your story creative, you must understand our skepticism. Interdimensional invaders that eat reality sound like something from a science fiction novel. Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber. The American delegate raised her hand. How do we know this isn't some elaborate hoax or psychological operation? Perhaps you represent an advanced weapons program from another nation. More chuckles followed. Jinwoo watched Captain Park's face. She didn't react to the laughter, but something in her eyes hardened. I understand your disbelief, she said calmly. Our leaders reacted the same way when the first dimensional refugees arrived to warn us. They laughed too. She paused. 70% of our global population is now dead or consumed. She nodded to one of her officers, who activated a device. The hologram changed to show strange shadow-like entities moving through cities, buildings crumbling into nothingness where they passed. The Void Collective detected your dimension approximately 3 weeks ago in your timeline. Captain Park continued. Our sensors can detect their preliminary scout probes already forming. You have perhaps 6 months before the first major incursion. The Chinese representative stood now. And you expect us to believe you crossed dimensions out of what? Altruism. To save a parallel Earth. Captain Park's expression didn't change. We came because humanity must survive somewhere. Our dimension is lost. We can slow the collective, but not stop them completely. But you have time to prepare if you start now. The Secretary General leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? The paradox carries the blueprints for dimensional stabilization technology and quantum phase weaponry, the only effective defense against void entities. We offer this technology and our experience in fighting them. In exchange for what? Asked the British representative suspiciously. A new home for our survivors, and your cooperation in building a dimensional defense network. Captain Park looked around the chamber. I have commanded the paradox through 16 major void incursions. My crew has more combat experience against these entities than anyone alive. You need us. The French delegate stood. This is absurd. We cannot commit global resources based on such fantastic claims without proof. Captain Park nodded as if expecting this. She turned to her communications officer, who handed her a small device. Paradox to Sentinel-1. Execute Protocol Veritas. The lights in the UN chamber flickered briefly. On every delegate's screen, and on the main display, real-time satellite feeds appeared showing a small dark anomaly that had formed over the southern Atlantic Ocean. This is a Void Scout probe, Captain Park explained as gasps filled the chamber. Small, nearly undetectable with your current technology. It's gathering data on your dimension's physical laws. She pressed another button on her device. The satellite feed showed a burst of energy from the orbiting paradox. The dark anomaly collapsed in on itself and vanished. Captain Park surveyed the now silent chamber. Laugh while you can. They are already detecting your dimension. And soon, they will come in force. The room remained absolutely silent. Dr. Lee Sang-ho adjusted his glasses as he stepped onto the massive ship. The metal floor beneath his feet hummed with strange energy. 20 other scientists from around the world followed him, their faces showing a mix of doubt and wonder. Captain Park walked ahead of them, her back straight and steps confident. This way to the engine room, she said simply. Your questions about our technology will be answered there. The hallways of the ISS Paradox were narrow and practical. Unlike the sleek spaceships in movies, every inch of space served a purpose. Crew members nodded respectfully as Captain Park passed. Many had scars or cybernetic limb replacements. Your crew seems very battle experienced, said Dr. Patel from India's quantum research team. Captain Park didn't slow her pace. Every person aboard this ship has lost family to the Void Collective. We are survivors first, soldiers second. The engine room doors slid open to reveal a chamber bathed in blue-white light. At its center floated what appeared to be a perfect sphere of darkness, suspended in a complex web of energy fields. "The dimensional drive core," Captain Park said. "The heart of our ship's ability to move between realities." Dr. Lee stepped forward, his instruments already taking readings. "Impossible," he whispered. "These energy signatures violate at least 6 fundamental laws of physics." A tall man with a neatly trimmed beard approached from a control station. His uniform identified him as Commander Kang Tawu, Chief Engineer. "Your laws of physics are incomplete," he said with a small smile. "Reality is more flexible than your science currently understands." Dr. Lee shook his head in amazement. "This technology shouldn't be possible for centuries," he whispered. Commander Kang's smile faded. "Necessity accelerates innovation," he replied. "When half your planet is consumed by void entities, you learn quickly." He guided them around the engine core, explaining the basics of dimensional field manipulation and quantum reality anchoring. Most of the scientists struggled to follow even his simplified explanations. "The drive creates a bubble of stable space-time around the ship," Commander Kang continued. "This allows us to slip between the cracks of reality, accessing parallel dimensions." "How did you develop this?" asked Dr. Chen from China's Advanced Physics Institute. Commander Kang touched a scar that ran along his neck. "I was part of the original research team at Yonsei University when the first void breach occurred. We had barely begun theoretical work on dimensional physics. Then we captured a piece of void technology from a scout entity. We learned by necessity, building each prototype while our cities fell one by one." The scientists fell silent, looking at the drive with new understanding. This wasn't just advanced science, it was survival technology. In the ship's briefing room, the scientists watched footage on large screens. The images showed cities, recognizable as Seoul, New York, and London, but with vast sections simply missing, replaced by swirling darkness. Buildings at the edges of these voids were half consumed, cut cleanly as if sliced by a knife. "These are void breaches in their mature stage," explained Lieutenant Ba Junyoung, the ship's science officer. "The entities enter through small tears in dimensional fabric, then expand the breach to allow larger harvesters through." The footage changed to show strange, shadow-like beings moving through streets. Where they touched, matter simply ceased to exist. "They don't destroy," Lieutenant Ba said quietly. "They consume. The matter, energy, and information are absorbed into their dimensional plane." Dr. Lee leaned forward. "And people? When humans are consumed?" Lieutenant Ba hesitated before answering. "We believe consciousness is also absorbed. Some of our researchers detected human thought patterns within the void entities, but distorted, fragmented. We don't know if this is a form of survival or simply echoes of what was taken." An American physicist raised his hand. "With respect, this video could be fabricated. We need hard evidence." Captain Park nodded as if expecting this. "Commander Kang, show them the Seoul Memorial recording." The screen changed to show what was clearly a personal video. A young woman smiled at the camera, holding a small child. Behind her was a park with cherry blossoms. "This is my wife and daughter," Commander Kang said, his voice flat. "This video was taken 3 days before the first major breach in our Seoul. My family was attending a concert when the void entities came through." The video continued, showing the happy family walking through the park. Then Commander Kang paused it. "I don't have bodies to bury. They simply ceased to exist, along with 2 million others that day." The room fell silent. Even the skeptical scientists looked uncomfortable. "We all carry similar memories," Captain Park said quietly. "Every crew member aboard the Paradox has lost their world. We came here not just to warn you, but because humans must survive somewhere in the multiverse." The evidence became undeniable 2 days later. Dr. Lee was in his temporary lab, studying samples of the Paradox's whole material, when alarms blared throughout the facility. Captain Park's voice came over the announcement system. "All personnel to secure stations. Dimensional anomaly detected over Antarctica." Dr. Lee rushed to the monitoring center, where screens showed satellite images of the Antarctic ice shelf. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed it, a small dark spot that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was growing. "First Void Scout probe," Captain Park announced as she entered the room. Small, but unmistakable. Government officials who had been observing the research team began making urgent phone calls. The anomaly continued to grow, now visible as a perfect circle of darkness about 30 meters across. "What will it do?" asked a nervous military officer. "Gather data on your dimension's physical laws. Test resistance to incursion. Send back information to the collective," Captain Park replied. "Then more will follow." She activated her communication device. "Paradox, this is Captain Park. Target locked on Antarctic anomaly." "Confirmed, Captain," came the reply. "Main cannon charged and ready." "Execute." On the screen, a beam of blue-white energy lanced down from the orbiting Paradox. When it struck the dark anomaly, the entire area flashed brilliantly. When the light faded, the anomaly was gone. "Target neutralized," reported the voice from the ship. "Dimensional fabric stabilizing." The flash had been so bright that it was visible from space. Reports began coming in from research stations and ships near Antarctica that had witnessed the event. Captain Park turned to the assembled scientists and officials. "That was a small scout probe, easily dispatched. The next ones won't be so simple, and they will come in increasing numbers." Dr. Lee stared at the screen, his hands trembling slightly. Everything he understood about physics and reality had changed in just a few days. "I believe you now," he said quietly. "What do we do?" Captain Park's expression softened slightly. "We prepare. We teach you to build what we've built. And we fight." Around the room, the formerly skeptical faces of government officials and scientists showed a new emotion. Fear. No one was laughing anymore. The world changed faster than anyone thought possible. 60 days after the Antarctic incident, every major nation had redirected its military and scientific resources toward a single goal: survival. Old enemies now worked side by side. The United Nations Dimensional Defense Initiative became the most powerful organization on Earth almost overnight. At the new Global Command Center built beneath Mount Sorik in South Korea, Captain Park examined the progress reports. The facility buzzed with activity as military personnel from dozens of nations worked alongside scientists and engineers. The location had been chosen for its natural protection and proximity to some of Earth's most advanced technology centers. "We're making progress, but not quickly enough," she told the assembled world leaders on the main screen. "The Void Collective moves faster in your dimension than it did in ours. Your quantum field is more compatible with their technology." "We're doing everything we can," replied the American president. "But rebuilding our global weapons systems around this new technology takes time." Captain Park nodded. She understood their challenges. In just 2 months, they had asked the world to accept an impossible truth and then completely transformed their military and scientific understanding. "Commander Kang, update on the Dimensional Anchor Network," she asked. The commander brought up a global map showing 7 glowing points spread across different continents. The primary anchors are under construction at all 7 locations. The Korean and Japanese sites are the most advanced at 75% completion. And weapons production. The factories in China, America, and Germany are now producing dimensional disruptor cannons. We equipped approximately 20% of the designated defense forces. Captain Park frowned. Not nearly enough. But they had no choice but to push forward. At the new Seoul Defense Academy, 50 of Earth's best fighter pilots stood at attention. They came from 20 different countries, former rivals now training together. Major Han Jae-yun paced in front of them, her cybernetic right arm gleaming under the lights. "Forget everything you know about aerial combat," she barked. "Void entities don't follow your physics. They don't care about your fancy maneuvers or your targeting systems." She activated a holographic display showing footage from battles in her dimension. Strange shadow-like forms moved through the air as fighter jets attempted to engage them. Most of the weapons passed harmlessly through the entities. Your conventional weapons are useless against void entities, she continued. Only dimensionally charged weapons can disrupt their quantum structure. And you must hit them at their weak points, the nexus cores that anchor them to our reality. A pilot from the British Royal Air Force raised his hand. Major, the simulators show that these entities move in patterns our tracking systems can't predict. How are we supposed to target them effectively? Major Han nodded. This was the key question. You must learn to see differently. She tapped her left eye, which the pilots now noticed had a slight silver gleam. In my dimension, we developed quantum sight enhancements. Your scientists are adapting the technology now, but until then you must learn to recognize the gravitational distortion patterns that precede entity movement. She activated the combat simulator. Each of you will take turns. By the end of this week, I expect you to achieve at least 30% hit efficiency. Those who can't will be reassigned to ground defense. The pilots exchanged nervous glances. In previous sessions, none had achieved better than 15%. Begin, Major Han commanded. As the first pilot entered the simulator, she watched with critical eyes. These humans had never faced extinction before. They didn't yet understand what it meant to fight an enemy that didn't just kill you, but erased your very existence. But they would learn. They had to. In what had once been a sports stadium in Incheon, Professor Yoon Do-hyun supervised the construction of Korea's dimensional anchor. The massive structure rose from the center of the field, a complex arrangement of quantum stabilizers and reality anchoring technology designed by Commander Kang's engineering team. Similar structures were being built in strategic locations around the world. The Mojave Desert in the United States, the Gobi Desert in China, the Australian outback, the Sahara in Algeria, the Amazon Basin in Brazil, and the Russian steppe. Increase power to the quantum field generators, Professor Yoon instructed. We need to create a stable resonance pattern with the other sites. Engineers adjusted controls as the massive rings at the center of the structure began to spin faster, generating a shimmering field of blue-white energy. Dr. Kim Jin-woo approached with tablet in hand. The quantum physicist who had accidentally opened the first gateway now worked tirelessly on the defense project. Professor Yoon, we're seeing unusual quantum fluctuations in the Pacific region, he reported. The patterns don't match any of our predictions. Professor Yoon frowned. Show me. The tablet displayed a map of quantum activity across the Pacific Ocean. Small anomalies had been appearing and disappearing for weeks, scout probes testing Earth's defenses. But now something different was forming. A coherent pattern of quantum disturbances arranged in a massive circular formation. This looks like coordinated activity, Professor Yoon said, his voice tight. Alert Captain Park immediately. At Global Command, Captain Park studied the data with growing concern. Commander Kang and the other senior officers from the Paradox gathered around the holographic display. This pattern is familiar, said Lieutenant Ba, the science officer. It matches the formation we saw before the New Delhi breach in our dimension. Captain Park nodded grimly. They're preparing for a major incursion, much sooner than we anticipated. She turned to the communications officer. Connect me with all 7 anchor sites. The screens lit up with the faces of the scientists leading each anchor project. What's our current network capacity? Captain Park asked. Professor Yoon spoke for the group. We're only at 60% capacity. The Asian and Australian anchors are operational. North America is at 85%. The others are still in early stabilization phases. That's not enough to withstand a major breach, Commander Kang said quietly. Captain Park studied the pattern of anomalies again. Years of fighting the void entities had taught her to recognize their movements. This formation was unlike the previous scout probes. It was deliberate, coordinated. They're coming sooner than we predicted, she announced. The Paradox has detected a major breach forming over the Pacific. I estimate we have less than 72 hours before they attempt a full incursion. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth wasn't ready. The defensive network was incomplete. The weapons still being distributed, the pilots still training. Options, Captain Park asked, looking at her senior officers. Commander Kang considered the holographic display. We could deploy the paradox directly over the forming breach. Use our dimensional drive to disrupt their entry point. That would likely destroy the ship, Lieutenant Ba pointed out. Yes, Commander Kang agreed quietly, but it might buy Earth more time. Captain Park shook her head. The paradox is Earth's most effective weapon right now. We can't sacrifice it prematurely. She studied the map again. We need to accelerate the anchor network deployment. All available resources should be redirected to the Pacific Rim anchors in Korea, Japan, and the United States. She turned to the global communications system. This is Captain Park to all Dimensional Defense Initiative forces. We are now at maximum alert status. The enemy has accelerated their timeline. Prepare for imminent contact. Throughout the command center, alarm systems activated. Similar alarms now rang in military bases and research facilities around the world. Earth would face its greatest threat with only partial defenses in place, but they would face it together. The first warning came from the Pacific monitoring stations. Quantum fluctuations spiked to unprecedented levels as reality itself began to warp. Satellite imagery showed a perfectly circular distortion forming 300 kilometers east of Japan. The ocean beneath it churned and boiled as the laws of physics strained. At Global Command, the alarms blared continuously. Captain Park stood calmly amidst the chaos, issuing orders with the steadiness of someone who had faced this nightmare before. All dimensional defense forces to battle stations, she commanded. Activate the anchor network at maximum power. Launch all squadrons. The sky above the Pacific darkened unnaturally, clouds swirling toward the distortion as if pulled by an invisible force. Then, with a silent flash that temporarily blinded satellite sensors, the breach opened. The sky tore open like a wound, revealing absolute darkness beyond. From that darkness, things began to emerge. Dark tendrils reached through the dimensional breach first, massive appendages of shadow and energy that seemed to both absorb and emit darkness. Behind them came thousands of smaller entities that defied description, part shadow, part machine, all hunger. They moved with disturbing fluidity, some flying through the air while others descended toward the ocean's surface. First wave is Scout-class entities, reported Lieutenant Ba from the sensor station. Second wave appears to be Harvester-class. No capital entities detected yet. Captain Park nodded grimly. They're testing our defenses before committing their main forces. Launch all squadrons. Across the Pacific Rim, airfields roared with activity as fighters equipped with newly installed dimensional disruptors took to the sky. Naval vessels with retrofitted weapons systems moved into position. This was the moment they had trained for over the past months. Colonel Choi Min-ho led the Korean 1st Dimensional Defense Squadron toward the breach. The 42 fighters under his command represented the best pilots Korea had to offer, now equipped with technology they barely understood. All pilots activate quantum sight enhancements, he ordered through the communication system. His left eye tingled as the implant activated, allowing him to see the true nature of the void entities. Through this enhanced vision, the seemingly chaotic movements of the entities revealed patterns and vulnerabilities. Remember your training, he continued. Target nexus points only. Conventional weapons are ineffective. Maintain formation delta until engagement range. The squadron acknowledged as they approached the swarm of entities now spreading outward from the breach. Similar squadrons from Japan, China, and American carriers joined them, creating a defensive perimeter around the expanding threat. Weapons hot. Engage at will, Colonel Choi ordered as they came within range. The dimensional disruptors mounted on the fighters activated, firing beams of blue-white energy that distorted space itself. Unlike conventional weapons, these didn't simply damage the entities. They disrupted the quantum connection between the void beings and our reality. A Harvester-class entity, roughly the size of a small building, disintegrated under concentrated fire from Choi's squadron. But for every entity they destroyed, more poured through the breach. "The breach is expanding," reported his tactical officer. "Estimated diameter now 4 kilometers and growing." Colonel Choi gritted his teeth. This was going to be a long battle. On the ground at the Seoul anchor station, Lieutenant Kim Soo-jin listened to the battle reports with growing concern. The massive dimensional anchor hummed with power, its energy rings spinning faster as they worked to stabilize reality against the incursion. "Lieutenant, quantum fluctuations detected 2 kilometers south of our position. Call the sensor operator. Signature matches void infiltrators." Soo-jin activated the facility's defenses. "All security teams to southern perimeter. Activate dimensional barriers." She had trained for this scenario. The anchor stations were primary targets for the void entities. If they could disable the global network of anchors, Earth's dimension would be vulnerable to complete consumption. Through the facility's windows, she could see strange distortions in the air approaching the perimeter. Void infiltrators, specialized entities designed to sabotage technology. They moved like liquid shadow, flowing across the ground and through obstacles. "Disruptor teams, target those infiltrators," she ordered. "Do not let them reach the main complex." Security teams armed with handheld dimensional disruptors formed defensive lines. The weapons fired, cutting through some of the approaching entities, but there were too many, and they moved too quickly. The first infiltrator reached the outer barrier, its form flattening against the energy field before finding a weakness and seeping through. Alarms blared as more followed. "Fall back to secondary positions," Soo-jin ordered. "Activate internal barriers." The battle for the anchor station had begun. If they failed here, Seoul, and possibly all of Korea, would be the first to fall to the void. More infiltrators poured through the perimeter as her teams fought desperately to hold them back. A security officer disappeared with a brief scream as an infiltrator engulfed him, his body simply ceasing to exist. "Hold the line," Soo-jin shouted over the chaos as her team repelled wave after wave of attacks. The anchor must remain operational. Aboard the ISS Paradox, now positioned high above the battle, Captain Park watched the tactical displays with growing concern. Earth's forces were fighting bravely, but the breach continued to expand. "Status of the anchor network?" she asked. Commander Kang checked the readings. "Operating at 73% capacity. It's slowing the breach expansion, but not stopping it. The Seoul and Tokyo anchors are under direct attack." Captain Park studied the holographic representation of the breach. Its structure was becoming increasingly stable, a permanent doorway between dimensions that would allow the full might of the Void Collective to pour through. "Show me the breach core analysis," she ordered. Lieutenant Ba brought up the detailed scan. "The breach has established 7 quantum tethers to the void dimension. Unless all are severed simultaneously, the breach will remain stable." Captain Park made her decision. "The main breach is too stable to collapse from outside. We need to collapse it from within." The bridge fell silent as the implications became clear. "You're suggesting we take the paradox into the breach," Commander Kang said quietly. "Yes, our dimensional drive can generate a controlled collapse if detonated at the center of the breach. It would seal it permanently." "The ship wouldn't survive," Lieutenant Ba pointed out. "Nor would anyone aboard." Captain Park nodded. "I know. I'll take a volunteer team. The rest of the crew will evacuate to Earth beforehand." "I'm going with you," Commander Kang said immediately. "As am I," added Lieutenant Ba. One by one, the senior officers volunteered. Captain Park felt a surge of pride in her crew. They had already lost one Earth. They would not lose another. "Prepare the dimensional collapse device," she ordered, "and send evacuation orders to all non-essential personnel." As the bridge crew moved to execute her orders, Captain Park turned to look at the view screen showing Earth below. Beautiful, blue, and still whole. In her dimension, that view had been corrupted by spreading void breaches until barely half the planet remained. "Not this time," she whispered to herself. "Not this Earth." She began plotting the Paradox's final mission. directly into the heart of darkness itself. The monument stood tall against the New York skyline, a spiraling tower of dark metal salvaged from the ISS Paradox. Etched into its surface were the names of those who had not returned from the final mission. Sunlight glinted off the metal as crowds gathered for the dedication ceremony of the Global Dimensional Defense Center. 3 months had passed since what the world now called the Void War. Cities along the Pacific Rim still showed scars from the battle. Parts of coastal Japan and the Philippines had suffered the worst damage, with entire sections simply gone, not destroyed, but consumed by void entities before the breach collapsed. Captain Park sat in her wheelchair at the edge of the stage. Her body was a map of injuries. Burns covered the right side of her face. Her left leg had been amputated below the knee, and doctors still weren't sure if she would walk again even with prosthetics. But she had survived when many others hadn't. The final mission of the Paradox played in her memory daily. The ship diving into the heart of the breach, reality twisting around them as they penetrated the space between dimensions. The void entities swarming the hull, tearing at the ship as they approached the center. Commander Kang's voice steady as he reported critical systems failing, and then the blinding light as they detonated the dimensional collapse device. She shouldn't have survived. None of them should have. But somehow, a portion of the ship had been ejected back into Earth's dimension in the final moments. Of the 28 crew members on the mission, only 12 returned alive. The audience applauded as the Secretary General concluded his speech. Then it was her turn. An aide helped Captain Park to the podium. She stood with difficulty, refusing the wheelchair for this moment. 3 months ago, many of you laughed when I warned of the threat coming to your world, she began, her voice strong despite her weakened body. I don't blame you. The idea of entities from another dimension seemed impossible. Now we all know better. The crowd remained silent. World leaders, military commanders, and ordinary citizens, all united by their shared experience of nearly losing their world. Your dimension is now known to the Void Collective as one that fights back, she continued. That makes you both a target and a beacon. They will return, stronger and more determined. But others will come too. Those fleeing the collective, seeking shelter in a dimension that can defend itself. She gestured to the side of the stage, where a group of people stood. Some clearly human, others humanoid but with subtle differences that marked them as dimensional refugees. The first had begun arriving just weeks after the breach collapsed, using smaller, controlled dimensional gates to reach Earth. Already, refugees from other dimensions have begun arriving, humans and non-humans alike, seeking sanctuary on the Earth that successfully repelled the void. They'd bring knowledge, technology, and warnings. We would be wise to listen. Captain Park paused, looking out over the crowd. This center represents humanity's commitment to dimensional defense, but it must be more than a monument. It must be the foundation of a new understanding of reality itself, and our place within it. As she returned to her seat, Commander Kang took the podium. His injuries had been less severe, though he still wore a supportive brace on his right arm. As director of Earth's new Dimensional Research Division, he had worked tirelessly since the battle. The technology that saved us came at a terrible cost, he said. The crew of the Paradox sacrificed everything to bring it to you. Now we have built upon that foundation. Behind him, a massive screen activated, showing images of shipyards where new vessels were under construction. We have integrated the Paradox's dimensional technology into a new fleet of Earth-built dimensional warships. The first, the EDS Defender, launches next week. 5 more will follow by year's end. The screen showed a sleek vessel that resembled the Paradox, but incorporated Earth's own design elements. Its dimensional drive core glowed with the same blue-white energy that had powered the original ship. We will no longer be caught unprepared, Commander Kang promised. Earth now stands as a fortress dimension, a world that the Void Collective failed to consume. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time since the war, people felt hope rather than just relief. After the ceremony, Captain Park sat near the monument, looking up at the names engraved there. Dr. Kim Jinwoo approached hesitantly. "Captain," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you again. If not for your warning, for your sacrifice." She shook her head. "No thanks needed, Doctor. Your world gave mine a second chance, a place for our survivors to call home." "I still feel responsible," he admitted. "My experiment opened the first gateway. It brought this war to Earth." "The Void Collective was already searching for your dimension," Captain Park replied. "If not through your gateway, they would have found another way. At least this way, you had warning and allies." She looked past him to where groups of dimensional refugees were being welcomed by Earth families who had volunteered to host them. Humans from dozens of parallel Earths, plus humanoids from dimensions where evolution had taken slightly different paths, all fleeing the same enemy. "Have you received any signals from the other Paradox ships?" Dr. Kim asked. Before the war in her dimension, multiple ships like the Paradox had been built and scattered across the multiverse, each seeking safe havens or fighting the collective on different fronts. "Two so far," she confirmed. "One from a dimension where Earth is mostly ocean. Another from a timeline where your World War II had a different outcome. Both discovered dimensional gates leading here after we collapsed the breach." "You're becoming a gathering point," Dr. Kim observed. Captain Park nodded. "As I said, both target and beacon." 1 week later, Captain Park watched from the observation deck as the EDS Defender rose from its construction bay. The first Earth-built dimensional warship gleamed in the sunlight, its weapons systems and defensive shields far more advanced than anything this world had possessed before the war. Commander Kane joined her, pride evident in his face as he watched his designs take flight. "She's beautiful," Captain Park said. "And only the beginning," he replied. "The dimensional anchor network is now at full capacity. 7 more ships are in production. And the early warning system can detect void activity across 12 neighboring dimensions." Captain Park nodded approval. Earth was transforming from a vulnerable world into a fortress dimension, perhaps even the headquarters of a multi-dimensional alliance against the Void Collective. "Will you accept command of the fleet when you've recovered?" Commander Kang asked. She touched the scars on her face. "If they'll have me. The doctors say I should be fit for duty in another month." Together, they watched as the Defender completed its test flight, executing a perfect dimensional jump to the moon and back. A small hop by the standards of dimensional travel, but a giant leap for Earth's technology. The sight stirred something in Captain Park that she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Her Earth was lost, but this one might survive. And not just survive, but lead the fight across all dimensions. Humanity had moved from laughter to dread when first confronted with the truth of the multiverse. But they had emerged stronger, united by common purpose. The fight for existence across all dimensions had only just begun, but now Earth stood ready. As the Defender returned to its dock, Captain Park allowed herself a small smile. For the first time since losing her home dimension, she felt she truly belonged somewhere. This Earth, with its determination to fight back against the darkness, had become her home. The end.